Hello all, A Knife Tale here, bringing you another knife review, and today we're going to be looking at this. The Kansept made Justin Lundquist. There's his mark right there. Reverie. Oh, it does say it on the blade. I didn't even notice that it said the name of the knife. That's the first time I've ever looked at the fine print. I don't like seeing the name of the knife or the code of the knife, but it is what it is. This knife is a front flipper with this wheel front flipper that's more of a top flipper. It's in titanium, G10. It is a bolster lock, and it's S35VN steel. And the action's pretty darn good. It's on bearings. Let's get the specs out of the way. We have a 2 7/8 inch blade, so it's pretty small. This is, in fact, probably the smallest blade I have, other than the micro knives that are 5th pocket knives. And I really wouldn't want to go any smaller than this. I don't like small knives under that size. Just shy of 7 inches overall, and the handle length is about 4 1/8. Just maybe a little bit under that. Basically, if I can't get a four finger grip on it, I don't want it. That's my personal pet peeve, I guess. You got to be able to grip your knife properly. Comparisons. Civivi Elementum for the fellow small knife, which, as you can see, is definitely larger. Don't get to say that very often. The handles are very comparable, though I think this one actually has a slightly longer handle, just a hair longer, but it's got a little bit less blade too. Full-size comparison, the Conspirator by Civivi, which is much larger. Closed profile, I mean, it's a small knife. It's got a curve, so I mean, you could say that it's taller, kind of, but not really. It's about as thick as the Element. Get this out of there. I always forget to do that. I think the thickness comparisons work better with the black background. So, it's about as thick as the Elementum. It is contoured, though, which is interesting for such a small knife. Because it makes it, I guess it increases the comfort. Yeah. Let's get these calipers before I pop the thing out again. Are you going to 0? Yeah, 0. Good. About 1/2 inch. So that's actually, at the thickest point, a little thicker than the Elementum, I think. Yeah, a decent bit thicker than the Elementum. It really doesn't look it. I guess it's the contouring playing tricks on me. Blade stock thickness, right up here. 137 thousandths, which is interesting. Maybe they were going for 138. So they're going for about 140 thousandths, which is actually quite a bit thicker than it needs to be for such a small knife. Behind the edge, on mine, there's no way, right? Is it really that thin? 12? 13 thousandths behind the edge. Interesting. Yeah, it is pretty darn thin. It doesn't have a lot of room to drop, so I imagine it gets thick pretty quickly, but in the beginning, at least, it's quite thin. Which is nice. Definitely nice. It cuts, it slices well. I haven't used this thing heavily, but it's not a really heavy use knife. It's a little sort of knife that you pull out, make a cut with, and put away. That's what I've done with it. It's worked well. It's held up well. It cut decently. S35 is good steel. It doesn't seem to be soft. It has kept actually a little bit more bite than I thought it was going to over a period of time. So there's no complaints there. Steel's good. Execution on that steel seems to be pretty good. get the old calipers out of the way, because they're never to be found when you need them, and then when you want them out of the way or you're doing something, they're right in your way. 2.9 ounces, so almost an ounce an inch. Very light, very small. Yeah, it's pretty, and that's actually kind of impressive considering this is titanium. It is milled inside for some weight reduction, but not a ton, but I guess because it's thin titanium, it's actually kind of impressive that they managed to get it almost even on those ratios with the tie bolster here. Hardware. T8. This is unfortunately... I'm not going to mess with it because I got it set fine. I don't think this is a captive pivot. Yeah, this is not a captive pivot, and I don't like that. You got to go from both sides. It's annoying. And there are more. There's another screw under there. These are T6s, and really small T6s. Like those, but they are super deep too. So I don't have a huge problem with that, especially on such a small knife. The clip is not reversible, so you probably aren't going to have to mess with them too much. And if you do, go for these two, and the screw under there I think is a T... It might be a T6, it might be a T8. I don't know. But, quick example. They're pretty deep, and... or tooled pretty deeply, so the tool itself sockets in there well. So I don't really have any issue with them, though I would still, of course, prefer never to see a T6 again. I know that's not going to happen. That screws a T6 too. Unfortunate. The heck is that? There appears to be a screw missing. I don't think that's on Kansept. I'm pretty sure that's on me. I've taken this knife apart like 3 times. And apparently the last time I decided to lose a screw. Actually, I think I might know where it is. I have a box of knife crap, and I think there's a screw in it that I wasn't sure where it went, and I'm pretty sure that's probably it. So, yeah. Why did I take this knife apart so many times? Fiddling with centering, cleaning it out, because it actually did get dirty in there for once, and one time, the first time I took it apart afterwards, after a number of flips, it suddenly got like really tight in the pivot and wouldn't move very well. It was only after if you played with it for a little bit. I don't know what the heck that was. It's gone now. But it made me take the knife apart again to clean out and mess with. It didn't seem to be dirt. It just seemed to be maybe I didn't have something perfectly lined up or something. All I know is non-captured pivots annoy me because of that. But, yeah. So, I think we have all of the specs and already started into the ramble. This knife has a Stonewash S35VN, comes down to a reasonably thin blade or edge. The spine and entire blade is crowned, which can be a nice addition and can sometimes not be. In this case, it leans more towards the not, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But we have this design textured bolster and cutout is kind of cool. Good access to the lock bar. Very smooth. Light shake shut on bearings. With this G10. The clip. Lanyard hole. Backspacer. I think that's titanium too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, we're going to have to start getting into some of the things that I think there are several misses on this knife. The first being the clip. It goes flat at the end, and because of the shape, it's a little bit pointy. And a small knife like this, it's fine in the hand, but if you go to adjust, you can get poked a little. Or you go to pick up the knife, and you get in that initial. It's not too bad for the poking, but it does. It's very stiff, and it doesn't have it doesn't have a continuous rise, so it's a little bit tricky in and out of the pocket. You're probably not going to be wearing this thing with thick jeans, but if you do, good luck to you. At least mine. Maybe others are different. I'm, of course, only speaking from experience. But yeah, this can be thick, pokey. It's not too bad most of the time. But just notice that. The other issue is those edges right there. There and there. Yes, it would look weird if it was rounded down a little tiny bit, but it needs it. This is a little sharp. This is sharp. Guess what you feel on both sides of your finger? They're not, again, so uncomfortable or so problematic that I'm going to say, oh, this is a deal breaker here. When I just grip it like this, I pretty much don't feel it because my finger's kind of out of those areas. But as soon as you start to really wiggle yourself around in there, I'm getting poked there, I'm getting poked there. So as long as you're not gripping too hard, which you probably wouldn't be. I guess for the knife, the way the style of knife is, it's not a problem. But on any other knife that I might be inclined to use a little harder, or that I might be inclined to adjust grips on more, yeah, those are not really very great. And I mean, you can see it. It's very pokey. And it's a real shame because of this lock bar is so well done in every other way. Again, my views, I think these are pretty... It's my experience. These are pretty objective, like, I mean, this sticks up even when it's closed. So, yeah. Don't love that. The other issue with this knife, and again, it's got multiple issues, but they're kind of like half issues. They're not massive issues. They could be on other knives. They don't make me dislike the knife, but there all are things that really should probably be done better. They're not catastrophic, but they're not completely ignorable either, is what I'm going for. The third one is the front flipper. I like the idea of this radius front flipper. It works reasonably well. It's grippy, it's fine. But one of the cardinal sins for me, well, not really a cardinal sin, but a very esoteric sin, is jimping on crown spines. And that's because, and you can kind of see it, how the jimping gets thinner and tapers out to the edge while being thickest at the middle. Because the entire spine is curved around, when you interact with that jimping, when you put your finger on it, you hit the top apex first. And because all of the material around that apex is curved, you are interacting with sharp. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the good kind of bite. Like if I were to do this a lot, my finger would start to get pretty unhappy with me. And I think that's especially a problem for, I mean, just like this is fine. In fact, this is slightly less deep, I guess you'd say, and doesn't really hurt or anything like that. And it doesn't hurt, but it is a little sharper, especially if you miss it a little bit, than it needs to be. Right? That, again, I'm picking here, but I really don't like this because I have experienced a few times on a few knives where their crown spines with this jimping that they get really nasty. They can really start to cut into your finger a little bit. Because, again, you're dealing with that apex and the crown, instead of the flat where you're contacting the entire thing, you're contacting first and foremost and hardest that top piece right there. Best way to do jimping on the crown spine, giant mouse. If you'll notice, their jimping actually sits in a little from the top of the spine. Because while it is slightly crowned, it is much less crowned than the rest of the spine. It actually, you got the spine here, and then the jimping sits lower than it, just a little bit, because they've actually knocked it down further to avoid having those high peaks and sharpness. This is great. This can get a little bit grating. Great and grating. But again, it's light. It's the detent's good, so it's not really a problem, and it grips decently. It's just, and I don't want to say it's too bad, because it's not. It works for this knife, and that's kind of the thing. Everything just barely works for this knife. They could be real issues that are just minor things on this knife. Oh, and the plunge grind is horrible. The plunge grind hits the edge. You can cut in a choil, but I think the stop pins, the stop pins are right in there. They're attached to the blade, I think. Yeah, that looks like the stop pins are moving, so that's my kind of take on this thing. It's really potentially great, but a few of the execution and design choices confuse me a little. And yet, it doesn't really result in anything that's too uncomfortable or unwieldy or a major problem. So I'm not really sure how to classify it, you know? That's what I'm struggling with here. It's a good knife. These premium versions are discontinued. There were like $185. There was a fat carbon one that was at like $250, and a Damascus one that was like $300 and something. But most of them were at this sort of $185 to $200 mark. They still do the budget version of them, where the cheapest plain, just solid micarta versions are $55, which puts them in the budget territory. And then there's ones where there's still a bolster, but I think it's like a G10 bolster on a G10 scale. They're at $75, which, or are they $79? I think they're $75. I'm almost positive. $76.30. I had them sitting just in case I wanted to double check. So they're just over that $75 cutoff. I'd still consider them a budget knife just because they're basically at that $75 cutoff. And they're in 154 cm, which is pretty good steel for the price. Even the cheaper $55 ones are, which is nice. So they're priced reasonably. A lot of the execution is done really well. But you have a couple very unfortunate decisions that are minor problems. So I'm going to say overall it's still recommendable, especially because it's an attractive, gentlemanly style knife. But know what you're getting is probably the most important thing here. You're not getting a ton of life. You're not getting maybe something that's could, depending on the size of your hand and where you put your fingers, could be a little bit uncomfortable for you. You're not getting something that's going to be super cooperative necessarily. Maybe this one's just stiff, but maybe you're getting something that's not going to cooperate with thicker pants. So it's good with caveats. And that's the review. So thanks for watching. See ya.